Sammy knew that patience was no longer the answer. He sat with Riham at night while the children slept, and they held each other and talked of the news, knots in their stomachs. The rebels and government forces were fighting harder, and other countries were sending more troops and weapons to join the fight. Riham said, "We have to leave Syria. The children deserve a better future." Sammy knew she was right. He wished he had said it first instead of thinking of the family bakery and the 50 years Hayan had delivered bread to his community. What would Sammy do somewhere else? Riham said, "I heard the border with Lebanon will be open this weekend. We must go then and leave this madness. We'll take your mother and your brother Adnan." They packed what food, clothes, blankets, and small kitchen things they could fit into their minivan and left the rest behind. Sammy could not drive with a shattered knee, so his brother Adnan took the wheel. Their mother sat in the passenger seat. Sammy and Riham sat behind them, with the two youngest in their laps and the older ones behind. They left in the early hours, the minivan groaning and squeaking under the weight, to navigate the shattered streets of the city and reach the frontier with Lebanon. Sammy stroked Noor's hair, and Riham talked about the future. The border was blockaded, and they found themselves in a chaotic clutter of other cars and minivans packed with desperate Syrians. No vehicles could cross, but they could go on foot. Adnan urged Sammy to take their mother, Riham, and the children across the frontier. He would drive the minivan back to Damas and get the rest of the family. Sammy, his mother Zinat, Riham, and the 4 children shouldered what they could carry from the minivan. They never saw Adnan again. They crossed the frontier and paid someone to drive them to a refugee camp close to Beirut. Some Syrians had money to rent apartments or found people to host them in Lebanon. But with Sammy's business closed and no contacts in Beirut, they didn't have that choice. While in Beirut, Sammy tried to find work, but without legal papers no one would hire him, and there were plenty of other Syrians who wanted work and didn't have a shattered knee. Riham wanted to go to Canada. "There is no war there," she said, "and people are free to say and believe what they want." Riham and the 4 children spoke English and some French. They would be okay in Canada. Sammy spoke only Arabic, but he wondered if Canada might be a safer place than Europe, where people were getting tired of the deluge of refugees.
Refugees fleeing their homelands often stop the moment they find safety, and that's putting a serious burden on southern European states, and Greece is demanding northern nations share the burden. Anastasia Cherkina has more.
Fleeing a bloody war in Syria, men, women and children fill a square in Athens. Here there's sorrow but also hope of starting afresh away from their torn homeland.
To have a better life, to have good life, peace life.
They dream of a new life in the EU, in quite literally any country that will take them. Reaching that goal is a long way ahead. There are 3.6 million refugees displaced from crisis-torn Syria, but not everyone in the EU is ready with open arms.
We're not ready to accept everyone. We shouldn't accept everyone. We don't need everyone.
Unaccepting of those left without a home because of a war in which the West has hardly been an innocent bystander through supporting the uprising that led to the current crisis. The UN and 30 humanitarian organizations have urged wealthy countries to accept more refugees as winter sets in.
We are on our limits, and we don't want to see people sleeping in the streets.
It's been days. Desperate families stranded outside a train station in Budapest. No answers, no help, nowhere to go.
Imagine yourself in our place. You are a human. We are a human. You have kids. We have kids.
Hundreds are stuck here, the Hungarian government refusing to let them board trains out of the country. Shireen Mamo walked here with her children. Her brother made it to Germany. She's now alone, feeling helpless and hopeless.
Sammy's mother Zinat put her hand on his knee and said, "I will stay in Lebanon. Adnan will find me here. The war will end, and I will go back to our home." Sammy registered his family with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. During registration, the UN officer conducted interviews with Sami and his family and recorded their age, gender, history, and requirements for medical help. The officer asked about their military involvement and their future plans.
Even with 60 years of experience, UNHCR can barely cope with the flood.
Our registration systems were totally overwhelmed. The scale, scope, and complexity of it was bigger than anything we have seen. We had at any point in time about 100 to 200,000 people awaiting registration.
UNHCR overhauls and massively expands its registration system, hiring and training new staff. It puts several registration centers in Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Jordan. It finds and uses innovative new technology.
Innovation was a necessity. We had to change the way our systems operate, and we learned on the way. We installed biometric systems to ensure integrity of the procedures.
The iris scan was a huge boost.
It develops new software. UNHCR staff can now add new and relevant information to the refugee database any time after registration.
Having an electronic survey allows direct data entry so that it feeds directly to our online applications.
Individuals, not just families, are registered. The vulnerable are identified. Needs are recorded.
It's not only about numbers. Registration is about the human story.
After the interviews, Sami waited for news. He knew that thousands applied, and that he had to wait for his family's turn in the queue to qualify for either of Canada's private sponsorship of refugees program or the government-assisted refugees program. A few months later, Sami received an SMS on his phone telling him to report with his wife and children for an interview at a visa office in Beirut. He could not believe that this was really happening. The Canadian visa officer interviewed Sami's family and referred them to a security check where CSIS investigated their associations and memberships and even their social media posts. After passing the security checks, Sami and his family completed medical exams and returned to the visa officer for a final decision. They were accepted and received their refugee travel documents and waited for their 13-hour flight to Canada.